This is not a drill. This is not a drill. General quarters. General quarters. All hands man your battle station.
From the late 1930s to the mid-40s, World War II captivated the Earth's attention. The main cause of the war is unknown, but there could have been multiple occasions and events that caused the war. Some say it was when Japan invaded Manchuria, owned by China, in 1931. Others have heard it may have been the defeat of Abyssinia, or present-day Ethiopia. It has even been cited that Hitler remilitarizing Rhineland in 1936 was a main cause for the World War. Throwing these dates and events aside, the most commonly known and used date is September 1st, 1939, the invasion of Poland. The United States was not directly participating in the war until the Japanese bombed the American naval base located in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, leading into the American response. Knowing the pride and fierceness of the American people, President Franklin Roosevelt previously realized it was inevitable that America would win this disastrous war, even before the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Beforehand, Roosevelt worked up a series of revisions made to prepare for the fight ahead. In November 1939, he persuaded Congress to repeal Neutrality Acts to allow France and Britain to purchase American weapons. After France fell to Germany in 1940, he ordered a military buildup and provided more support for Britain. Roosevelt stated in his fireside address to the nation on December 29, 1940,
"We must be the great arsenal of democracy. For us, this is an emergency as serious as war itself. We must apply ourselves to our task with the same resolution, the same sense of urgency, the same spirit of patriotism and sacrifice as we would show were we at war."
Japanese involvement in the war started by engaging countries with its imperialist and expansionist ideas. They annexed Korea and invaded China to catch up with other powerhouses in the world. Japan simply wanted to become powerful and conquer the rest of Asia. However, the States became unhappy with this and cut off their trade relations with Japan. Japan also signed the Tripartite Pact with Nazi Germany and the Fascist Italy. They would assist each other should any of the three countries be attacked by a country not involved in the war. Japan had previously fought with the USSR over border conflicts earlier in 1939. Their defeat made them reluctant to face the land warfare of the Soviet Union. Instead, they focused on extracting states, gaining critical resources when Germany fought the Soviet Union in the summer of 1941. The occupied states could not send their reinforcements over to the Soviets because of the Japanese standing in their way.
Japan found extreme success in the Southeast Asia region by conquering Indonesia, Philippines, British Malaya, and Burma. They were also on the verge of invading Australia, India, and Laos. However, by the Battle of Midway, the tides began to turn. America fought with 3 carriers, 50 support ships, 233 carrier aircraft, 127 land-based aircraft, and 8 submarines. Japan outnumbered the states roughly 2-1. Despite having a larger arsenal at the Battle of Midway, Japanese carriers were caught off guard refueling and rearming their planes, and fell to the bombers of the states. By the end of 1944, Japanese victory seemed impossible. Oil shipments from the East Indies almost stopped, imports fell around 40%, and half of the Japanese merchant fleet and 2/3 of their tankers were destroyed. By early 1945, the United States started firebombing the bigger Japanese cities. Industrial cities were getting destroyed, one after another. Japan's chances were over. They requested help from the Soviet Union to help ease conflicts between Tokyo and Washington. However, the United States government would not accept this. On July 25th, they issued a joint statement saying they would only accept unconditional surrender. Japan would keep fighting even if their chances of winning were 0%. It was until the nuclear bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki which led Emperor Hirohito to make a radio broadcast announcing the surrender of Japan on August 15, 1945. By 1945, Japan had 3 million people dead and lost 25% of their national wealth. Although the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki was horrific, Japan recovered successfully, and in the long term it positively impacted Japan. Due to all the destruction, Japan was forced to reconstruct numerous facilities and buildings. All the reconstruction allowed Japan to have a speedy economic recovery. This economic growth was referred as the economic miracle. The United States was a major asset in the recovery of the economy of Japan. General Douglas MacArthur took charge of the recovery of Japan a month after Japan's unconditional surrender. They built a supreme command of Allied powers known as SCAP and immediately began to rebuild Japan. An Allied Council of Great Britain, Soviet Union, and China had an advisory role, but MacArthur always had final authority in decisions. There were 3 major problems that SCAP had to solve: the demilitarization of Japan, economic reform, and social reform. During the first phase, the Allies punished Japan for their militarism and expansionism. SCAP conducted war crime trials in Tokyo and demilitarized the Japanese army. In doing so, they banned all former military officers from gaining leadership roles in the new government. To reform the economy, SCAP decided upon land reform. It reduced the power of the rich landowners and benefited the majority of farmers. They also attempted to transform the economy into a more free market capitalist system. In 1947, SCAP called for Japanese authorities to write a new constitution that emphasized on civil rights, similarly to the states. Even though the document included downgrading the emperor to a figurehead state, the emperor supported the draft and so did the public. SCAP legalized and supported labor unions, as well as eliminating censors on public expression. Lastly, in the third phase, SCAP established a formal peace treaty to end the war and the occupation of Japan. In the September of 1951, 49 out of 52 nations signed the treaty in San Francisco. By 1980, Japan had become the second largest economy in the world. Japan had created many automobile brands such as Toyota, Honda, and Nissan. All 3 of these are still widely used in the present day. These were just a few of the many prosperous corporations founded during the reconstruction of Japan. Japan had to build a lot of things from scratch, leading to innovations of technology. They had a strong desire to catch up to the West, so they had several big changes. Machine gun factories were converted to making sewing machines, and optical weapons factories produced cameras and binoculars. At one point, Japan was very close to the total employment of its people. Japan was sustained by the United States giving them $500 million annually. The welfare society saved Japanese government much money, which was liberally loaned to companies and guaranteed a secure supply of funding to many companies. This led to competition and technological innovation. After the war, the Japanese were taught to redirect their devotion to the nation from its military expansionism to economic expansion.